This establishment caters to a certain caliber of clientele.
If someone had told the morning staff at Heritage Trust Bank that the quiet black woman in designer jeans was about to fire them, all they would have laughed. And maybe that was the cruelest part, because for exactly 10 minutes they treated her like she was invisible, while she controlled more money than their entire branch combined. Before we dive into this story that changed everything, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. I want to know who's part of this community fighting for respect and dignity. And if you believe that respect should never depend on your appearance, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Because in exactly 10 minutes, everything you think you know about power, prejudice, and justice is about to shift right here on the marble floors of Heritage Trust Bank. By the time this story ends, you'll understand that sometimes the quietest voice in the room holds the most power. And sometimes justice doesn't come with sirens and handcuffs. It comes with a signature on a termination letter. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Heritage Trust Bank at 2847 Prosperity Boulevard in downtown Dallas, Texas. At exactly 9:47 a.m. on this Tuesday, March 15, 2025, the air inside the grand lobby hummed with the quiet confidence of old money and new ambition. Crystal chandeliers caught the light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, creating dancing patterns across walls lined with oil paintings of the bank's founding fathers. The sound was distinctive here. Designer heels clicked against polished stone in measured rhythms. Hushed conversations floated between gilded columns as clients discussed million-dollar deals in voices trained never to rise above a whisper. The scent of leather briefcases and expensive cologne mixed with the sterile cleanliness of a place where money was both made and moved with surgical precision. Two distinct seating areas divided the lobby like an unspoken class structure. To the right, plush burgundy leather chairs surrounded a mahogany table decorated with current issues of Forbes and Wall Street Journal. A small brass plaque read, "Premium Services Clientele." To the left, standard bank chairs faced a wall-mounted television broadcasting financial news with a simple sign indicating general banking services. Behind the main counter, tellers worked with practiced efficiency, their movements choreographed by years of processing transactions that ranged from Social Security deposits to corporate acquisitions. The premium services desk sat elevated on a small platform, its brass nameplate catching light like a beacon private banking and investment services. This was Heritage Trust Bank's flagship branch serving Dallas's financial elite with the discretion and exclusivity they demanded. Annual revenue flowed through these doors at $847 million, making it one of the most profitable locations in the Southwest region. Every detail, from the imported Italian marble to the handcrafted bronze door handles, whispered the same message. This was a place for people who belonged, for those who understood their station, for clients who looked the part. The morning rush was just beginning, and the lobby filled with its usual parade of power suits, expensive watches, and inherited confidence. But in exactly 13 minutes, this sanctuary of financial privilege would become the stage for a reckoning that would echo far beyond these marble walls. Dr. Valeria Richmond paused just outside the revolving doors of Heritage Trust Bank, checking her reflection in the polished brass. At 42, she carried herself with the quiet confidence that came from building an empire from nothing and knowing exactly who she was, regardless of who others expected her to be. She wore dark designer jeans that fit perfectly, paired with a cream cashmere sweater that spoke of understated elegance rather than flashy wealth. Her natural hair was styled in an elegant twist that required no apology and made no concessions to anyone's expectations. A simple gold watch and small pearl earrings completed her look, professional but approachable, powerful without being performative. What the morning staff at Heritage Trust couldn't know as she stepped through their doors was that Dr. Valeria Richmond had built Richmond Capital Holdings from a single rental property purchased with her college graduation money into a $12.8 billion portfolio spanning real estate technology investments and community development funds across 17 states. Born Valeria Williams in Oak Cliff, the daughter of Samuel Williams, a sanitation worker who rose at 4 a.m. every morning for 37 years to provide for his family. Her mother, Rose Williams, cleaned office buildings in downtown Dallas, including this very bank during Valeria's childhood. While other kids played after school, Valeria did homework in corporate lobbies, watching her mother empty trash cans and mop floors for people who never looked at her face. Samuel Williams had dreams beyond sanitation routes. In 1987, when Valeria was 4 years old, he walked into Heritage Trust Bank with a business plan for a small cleaning service complete with financial projections handwritten on notebook paper and a firm handshake. He was denied a $15,000 loan without the courtesy of a full review. The loan officer, a man whose nameplate read Assistant Manager, told Samuel that people like you should stick to realistic expectations. Samuel never tried again. He worked his sanitation route until his heart gave out at 58, 3 years before Richmond Capital Holdings reached its first billion in assets under management. He died believing the system would never change, that doors would always remain closed to people who looked like his family. But he had raised someone who believed doors were meant to be opened, and if they wouldn't open, they could be purchased. Today, Valeria carried a leather portfolio containing documents that would finalize Richmond Capital Holdings' acquisition of a controlling 67% stake in Heritage Trust Bank's parent company. The purchase, completed just Friday afternoon, made her the largest private investor in an institution that employed over 12,000 people across the Southwest. But today wasn't about paperwork or corporate governance. Today was about something far more personal. For weeks, Richmond Capital's compliance team had received anonymous complaints about discriminatory practices at this specific branch. Stories of minority customers being interrogated, delayed, denied services, or simply treated as unwelcome in a place their tax dollars helped ensure. Valeria didn't believe in corporate investigations conducted from corner offices. She believed in seeing truth with her own eyes. So she had scheduled a 10:00 a.m. meeting with Regional Director Kenneth Harper under the pretense of discussing contract renewals. What she hadn't mentioned was that she would arrive early dressed as herself rather than as Dr. Richmond's CEO and primary stakeholder. She wanted to see how Heritage Trust treated customers who looked like her father. She wanted to witness firsthand whether the culture that had crushed Samuel Williams's dreams still lived in these marble halls. As she approached the front counter portfolio in hand, calm and professional, Valeria Richmond wasn't just conducting a test. She was completing a promise made to a man who had died believing change was impossible. In exactly 3 minutes, she would discover whether her father had been right. Behind the polished mahogany counter of Heritage Trust Bank's Premium Services section, the morning staff moved through their routines with practiced precision, each playing their role in maintaining the institution's reputation for exclusivity and discretion. Isabella Crawford Whitman stood at the center of it all, the branch manager who had transformed Heritage Trust's flagship location into the most profitable in the region. At 38, Isabella was the product of Connecticut boarding schools and Yale University's business program, though she preferred to let her results speak rather than her pedigree. Her platinum blonde hair was styled in a perfect chignon that never moved even during the longest days, and today she wore an emerald silk blouse beneath a black Armani suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Isabella's red Louboutin stilettos clicked against the marble with authority as she surveyed her domain. A diamond tennis bracelet caught the light when she gestured, and everything about her presence suggested someone accustomed to deference. She had climbed the banking ladder not through connections alone, but through an unwavering commitment to what she called maintaining standards. In Isabella's view, Heritage Trust served a particular caliber of clientele, and preserving that exclusivity was what kept their profit margins so impressively high. Her signature phrase, delivered with a smile that never reached her eyes, had become legendary among staff. This establishment caters to a certain caliber of clientele. She believed in elegant prejudice, the kind that hid behind policy and procedure, rather than crude language discrimination delivered with perfect grammar and expensive perfume. Miguel Santos, the 33-year-old assistant manager, occupied the complex middle ground between ambition and conscience. Born in El Paso, he was the first in his family to attend college working nights at a warehouse to pay for his business degree. Miguel had joined Heritage Trust 3 years ago with genuine enthusiasm for helping people achieve their financial goals, but daily compromises had worn thin his initial idealism. Isabella valued Miguel because he followed orders without question. But lately her orders had begun to conflict with the values his parents had raised him with. His wife, Carmen, a teacher at a nearby elementary school, frequently asked why he seemed troubled after work. Miguel had never told her about the subtle ways certain customers were discouraged, the extra verification procedures, the convenient computer malfunctions that happen more often for some people than others. Brittany Walsh, 26, operated the premium services counter with the nervous energy of someone perpetually afraid of making mistakes. A recent graduate from a local business college, she carried student loan debt that made her deeply grateful for her position at Heritage Trust. Brittany had been trained to recognize appropriate clients for premium services, though no one had ever explicitly defined what that meant. She had learned through observation, watching Isabella's reactions, noting which customers received warm smiles and which were directed elsewhere. The pressure to meet quarterly goals made Brittany eager to please her supervisors, especially Isabella, who controlled performance reviews and advancement opportunities. She had absorbed the unspoken rules about maintaining Heritage Trust's brand standards without fully understanding the human cost of those standards. David Morrison, the 45-year-old security chief, brought military precision to his civilian role. A former Army MP who had served 2 tours overseas, David approached his position at Heritage Trust with the same discipline he had applied to base security in Afghanistan. His job was to follow protocols, maintain order, and protect the institution's assets and reputation. David rarely questioned the orders he received from management. In his military experience, the chain of command existed for good reasons, and civilians who challenged authority usually created more problems than they solved. His radio crackled with constant updates from corporate security, and his presence in the lobby was designed to communicate that Heritage Trust took protection seriously. Rachel Torres, 29, represented the newest hire in customer relations, having joined Heritage Trust only 6 weeks earlier. A graduate of UT Dallas with a degree in communications, Rachel had been excited to begin her career in financial services, believing she could help people navigate complex banking relationships and achieve their goals. But Rachel's enthusiasm had been steadily dampened by what she observed during her training period. She noticed patterns in how different customers were treated, discrepancies that made her uncomfortable, but which she had been told were simply risk management protocols. As the newest employee, Rachel felt powerless to challenge established procedures, but her discomfort grew daily. These 5 individuals, each carrying their own motivations and blind spots, were about to encounter a customer who would test every assumption they had made about power privilege and their roles in perpetuating or challenging institutional prejudice. At 9:47 a.m., 7. They were simply doing their jobs. By 10:00 a.m., they would be participants in a reckoning that would change their understanding of what those jobs actually required. Valeria Richmond approached the premium services counter with measured steps her portfolio held confidently, but not aggressively. The morning light streaming through the tall windows illuminated her professional appearance as she crossed the marble floor, her presence creating barely a ripple in the lobby's carefully maintained atmosphere. Brittany Walsh stood behind the elevated counter organizing paperwork with mechanical precision. Her attention was focused on a spreadsheet displaying quarterly performance metrics numbers that would determine whether she qualified for the year-end bonus that would help with her student loan payments. She had been trained to greet customers within 30 seconds, but the training had also included subtle guidance about prioritizing certain types of interactions. "Good morning," Valeria said politely, her voice carrying the professional tone she had perfected through decades of boardroom negotiations. "I have an appointment with Mr. Harper." Brittany's eyes remained on her computer screen for another 15 seconds before she looked up with a practiced smile that faltered slightly when she took in Valeria's appearance. The designer jeans and cashmere sweater didn't fit the template Brittany had been taught to recognize for premium services clients. Where were the pearls, the structured blazer, the obvious signals of inherited wealth and social position? Ma'am Brittany set her tone, shifting to something more cautious. "You'll need to use the standard services line." She gestured vaguely toward the general banking area without lifting her hand, fully, a dismissal that looked polite but felt cold. Valeria's expression remained calm, though something flickered behind her eyes. She had expected this moment, but experiencing it still carried the sting of familiarity. "I don't think that will be necessary. My appointment was scheduled in advance. He should be expecting me." The word appointment finally brought Brittany's full attention to bear. She turned from her spreadsheet with a look that mixed skepticism with barely concealed irritation. Her examination of Valeria was thorough but quick, taking in the natural hair, the absence of obvious luxury brands, the quiet confidence that didn't announce itself with expensive accessories. "He's in a meeting," Brittany replied, though no such meeting appeared on her scheduling system. "And he doesn't take walk-ins." Her voice carried a finality that suggested the conversation should end there, that reasonable people would understand their place and move accordingly. "I'm not a walk-in," Valeria said gently, maintaining her professional composure. "I'm Dr. Richmond." Brittany's slight laugh came out before she could stop it, the kind of sound that revealed more than she intended. "Right. I'm sure. Look, if you're here about a loan application, there's a different desk for that." She pointed toward the general banking area with the same dismissive gesture, this time with less effort to disguise her impatience. From his position near the lobby's security station, David Morrison noticed the interaction. His military training had taught him to observe body language, to detect tension before it escalated into problems. What he saw was a customer who wasn't moving when directed a situation that could develop complications if not managed properly. David approached with the measured stride he had used when patrolling military installations, his presence designed to communicate authority without immediate threat. His uniform was pressed, his badge polished, his radio positioned visibly on his shoulder. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying the weight of protocol, "you're holding up the line. You either take a number or step aside." The lobby's atmosphere shifted subtly as other customers became aware of the developing situation. A well-dressed elderly woman glanced over from the premium seating area with mild annoyance. A businessman checking his Rolex looked up from his phone, his expression suggesting that efficiency was being compromised by someone who didn't understand the system. But not everyone watched with indifference. Near the general banking area, James Murphy, a 34-year-old tech entrepreneur who had built 2 successful startups, recognized something familiar in the interaction. James had experienced similar moments in venture capital offices, tech conferences, and client meetings where his appearance and age didn't match expectations for serious business discussions. He discreetly activated his phone's camera, positioning it to capture the scene while appearing to check messages. His Instagram account, @TechEntrepreneur_Dallas, had built a following of 50,000 by documenting both the successes and challenges of building businesses in Texas. Today, he sensed, might require documentation. Valeria looked around the marble lobby, taking in the surveillance cameras, the pamphlets promising equal opportunity, banking the subtle segregation between premium and standard services. The weight of decades settled on her shoulders as she recognized the same dynamics that had crushed her father's dreams in this very building. "Fine," she said quietly, her voice steady but carrying an undertone that suggested calculation rather than defeat. "I'll wait." She moved toward a chair near the window, pulling out her phone as she settled into the standard seating area. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, typing a 4-word message. "I've arrived." "Observing." The response came back in less than a minute. "Understood. Proceed." As Valeria sat in the morning sunlight portfolio on her lap, she began what would become the most expensive waiting period in Heritage Trust Bank's history. Around her, the routine of financial privilege continued, unchanged staff and customers moving through their practiced roles, unaware that they were being evaluated by someone who could rewrite the rules entirely. The clock on the wall showed 9:52 a.m. In exactly 8 minutes, everything would change. But for now, Valeria Richmond waited patiently, watching and remembering her father's face on the day he came home empty-handed from this same marble lobby 38 years ago. The morning light continued to stream through Heritage Trust Bank's tall windows as Valeria Richmond settled into her chair, but the atmosphere around her had begun to shift in ways both subtle and deliberate. What started as dismissive indifference was about to evolve into something far more calculated and cruel. Isabella Crawford Whitman emerged from her corner office like a predator who had sensed disturbance in her territory. Her emerald silk blouse caught the light as she moved across the marble floor with practiced authority, red stilettos clicking in measured rhythm. She had built her reputation on maintaining Heritage Trust's exclusive atmosphere, and the scene developing at Brittany's counter demanded her immediate attention. "Is there a problem here?" Isabella's voice carried across the lobby with crystal clarity, pitched perfectly to sound concerned, while simultaneously drawing attention to the disruption. "We can't have disruptions during business hours." Her smile was as polished as her appearance, warm on the surface, but cold beneath the kind of expression perfected in boardrooms, where difficult decisions were made with pleasant faces. Brittany looked up with visible relief, grateful for backup from someone who could handle situations above her pay grade. "This woman claims to have an appointment with Mr. Harper, but I don't see anything on the schedule." Isabella approached Valeria's chair with the measured steps of someone conducting an inspection. Her examination was theatrical, designed as much for the audience of other customers as for the woman she was evaluating. She took in the designer jeans with an expression that suggested confusion, the cashmere sweater with barely concealed skepticism, the leather portfolio with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for suspicious packages. "May I see your identification and account information?" Isabella's request sounded reasonable, even helpful, but carried an undertone suggesting that such documentation would likely prove insufficient. When Valeria calmly handed over her platinum card and driver's license, Isabella held them with 2 fingers as if concerned about contamination. "These documents seem questionable," Isabella announced, her voice pitched to carry across the lobby. "We've had issues with forgeries lately. Identity theft is unfortunately common in this area." She paused meaningfully, allowing the implications to settle. Individuals attempting to access accounts fraudulently often target establishments like ours. The accusation hung in the air like smoke, acrid and impossible to ignore. Other customers began to pay closer attention, some with curiosity, others with the kind of discomfort that comes from witnessing something that feels wrong but unsure how to respond. Isabella moved to the premium services counter with Valeria's documents, making a show of examining them under the desk light. "Brittany, please run these through our verification system, and call security while you're at it." Her voice was loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear a public announcement disguised as an internal communication. "Security to premium services," came Brittany's voice over the intercom system, crisp and official. "Potential unauthorized access. Possible fraudulent documentation." David Morrison's radio crackled to life with updates from the corporate security center. Protocol required immediate response to potential fraud alerts, and his military training demanded quick action to neutralize threats before they escalated. He approached Valeria's chair with increased purpose, his presence now clearly focused and potentially threatening. "Ma'am," David's voice carried military authority. "Attempting to access accounts fraudulently is a federal crime. I'm going to need you to remain in that chair while we verify your identity." His hand moved to his radio, ready to escalate to local law enforcement if the situation required additional intervention. The lobby's atmosphere had transformed completely. What began as routine morning business had become a public spectacle, with Valeria Richmond positioned at the center as the suspected criminal. Conversations stopped. Newspapers lowered. The normal hum of financial activity gave way to the kind of charged silence that precedes either violence or revelation. From his position near the general banking area, James Murphy felt his stomach tighten with recognition. He had witnessed similar scenes in different settings, always following the same pattern: assumption, accusation, escalation, humiliation. His phone was already recording, though he kept it positioned discreetly to avoid drawing attention to himself. Near the premium seating area, Sarah Jensen, a lifestyle blogger with a growing TikTok following, noticed the commotion. Sarah had built her platform on documenting authentic moments of social interaction, particularly those that revealed underlying tensions in everyday situations. Something about the scene developing before her triggered every instinct she had developed for content that mattered. Sarah discreetly activated her phone's live stream function, positioning the camera to capture the interaction while appearing to check her messages. Her followers, numbering nearly 75,000, were accustomed to her morning banking routine, but today they would witness something none of them expected. Isabella returned from the counter with Valeria's documents, her expression grave with manufactured concern. "I'm sorry, but our system is having difficulty verifying these credentials. The computer shows several inconsistencies that require further investigation." What kind of inconsistencies? Valeria's question was calm, almost academic, as if she were discussing someone else's situation entirely. "Account access patterns that don't match the profile associated with these documents," Isabella replied smoothly, having perfected the language of official-sounding discrimination. "We're required by federal law to investigate any irregularities that might indicate fraudulent activity." The explanation sounded reasonable to anyone not familiar with the flexibility of banking verification systems, how easily technical difficulties could be manufactured when convenient, how subjective irregularities could become when filtered through institutional bias. Miguel Santos watched from his position at the assistant manager's desk, feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the interaction. His 3 years at Heritage Trust had taught him to recognize when verification procedures were being selectively applied, but challenging Isabella's judgment would require courage he wasn't sure he possessed. Perhaps Isabella continued, her voice carrying across the lobby. "It would be better if you visited one of our community banking locations. They might be better equipped to handle your particular banking needs." The suggestion was delivered with a smile wrapped in the language of helpfulness, while clearly communicating where certain customers belonged. The pattern was complete now: dismissal, escalation, accusation, and finally direction toward the exit. But Valeria Richmond remained seated, portfolio on her lap, expression calm, hands folded, waiting for something the Heritage Trust staff couldn't yet imagine. At 9:57 a.m., Isabella Crawford Whitman believed she had successfully managed a potential disruption and maintained the exclusive atmosphere that made Heritage Trust profitable. She had no idea that in exactly 3 minutes, her entire understanding of power, privilege, and proper procedure would be turned upside down. As the tension in Heritage Trust Bank's lobby reached a crescendo, the digital age transformed what might have once been a private humiliation into a public reckoning broadcast in real time to thousands of viewers across social media platforms. James Murphy's entrepreneurial instincts had been shaped by years of recognizing moments that mattered. His tech entrepreneur Dallas Instagram account had built its following by documenting both the victories and struggles of building businesses in Texas. But what he witnessed unfolding at Heritage Trust transcended business content. This was about basic human dignity, and his 50,000 followers needed to see it. He discreetly switched to Instagram Live, angling his phone to capture the scene while maintaining the appearance of checking messages. His voice was low but clear as he began narrating. "Y'all, I'm at Heritage Trust Bank in Dallas right now, and I'm watching something that has my blood pressure through the roof. This black woman is being treated like a criminal for trying to conduct business. Comments began flooding the live stream immediately. What's happening exactly? Is this really happening in 2025? Someone needs to intervene. Get closer so we can see better. This is why I don't bank with Heritage. James adjusted his position slightly, ensuring his camera captured both Valeria's composed demeanor and Isabella's theatrical performance. The manager is claiming her documents are fraudulent. She's calling security. This woman hasn't raised her voice, hasn't been aggressive, literally just tried to keep an appointment. Near the premium seating area, Sarah Jensen's lifestyle and social justice TikTok account had initially gone live to document her morning routine, but her content had pivoted the moment she recognized discrimination happening in real time. Her followers were accustomed to her thoughtful commentary on social issues, but they had never seen her document injustice as it unfolded. Dallas friends, I need y'all to witness this, Sarah whispered into her phone, her Texas accent becoming more pronounced as her emotions intensified. I'm at Heritage Trust Bank on Prosperity Boulevard, and this is exactly what we've been talking about, banking. While black is apparently still a crime in 2025, her viewer count climbed rapidly, 5,000, then 15,000, then 25,000 people watching live as Isabella continued her performance of bureaucratic discrimination. The comments section exploded with outrage support and demands for action. Post this to Twitter too. Someone call the news. What bank is this again? Everyone needs to see this. I'm screen recording in case they delete it. Sarah's voice carried clearly as she continued her narration. The branch manager is a white woman in designer clothes treating this customer like she's automatically suspicious. Y'all, this woman looks professional, calm, respectful. But apparently that doesn't matter if you don't look like what they expect money to look like. At a table near the window, Mrs. Carmen Rodriguez, a 67-year-old retired teacher, watched the scene with the weight of recognition. She had banked at Heritage Trust for over 20 years, had watched similar interactions unfold too many times to count, but had never seen anyone document what was happening. Her granddaughter Maria, a college sophomore studying social justice, had taught her about the power of viral videos to create change. Mrs. Rodriguez discreetly opened her phone's camera app, her hands trembling slightly with both age and anger. She had experienced enough discrimination in her lifetime to recognize it in any language, any setting, wrapped in any level of politeness. From behind the teller counter, Rachel Torres felt her stomach churning with familiar anxiety. 6 weeks into her employment at Heritage Trust, she had witnessed 3 similar scenes, each following the same script: professional minority customer, sudden verification problems, security involvement, eventual departure. She had been told these were standard risk management protocols, but watching them unfold always felt wrong. Rachel began taking notes on her computer, not because anyone had asked her to, but because her communications degree had taught her the importance of documenting patterns that might need to be addressed later. She noted timestamps recorded the sequence of escalation, captured direct quotes from Isabella's performance. The digital documentation was expanding beyond individual social media accounts. Screenshots of James's Instagram Live were being shared across Twitter with hashtags like #HeritageDiscrimination and #banking while black. Sarah's TikTok was being duetted and stitched by other creators, each adding their own commentary and expanding the reach. A local news producer scrolling through trending Dallas hashtags during her morning social media scan noticed the spike in Heritage Trust-related content. Within minutes, she had contacted field reporters and begun monitoring the live streams for potential breaking news coverage. Heritage Trust's corporate communications team received their first notification at 9:58 a.m., an alert system they had installed to monitor social media mentions of their brand. What started as routine morning monitoring quickly escalated to crisis communications protocol as they watched their flagship branch become the center of a viral discrimination incident. Meanwhile, Valeria Richmond sat quietly in her chair, observing not just the discrimination directed at her, but the digital ecosystem that was documenting and amplifying every moment. She understood that whatever happened next would be witnessed by thousands, recorded by multiple sources, and preserved permanently in the digital record. The clock showed 9:59 a.m. In exactly 1 minute, Kenneth Harper would arrive with his entourage, and the carefully documented narrative of Heritage Trust's discriminatory culture would collide with the reality of who they had been discriminating against. But the internet had already rendered its verdict, and no corporate explanation would be able to erase what thousands of people had witnessed in real time. Isabella Crawford Whitman stood at the center of Heritage Trust Bank's marble lobby, like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of institutional prejudice. At 9:58 a.m., she believed herself to be in complete control of the situation, managing a potential disruption with the sophisticated discrimination that had made her so successful in maintaining Heritage Trust's exclusive reputation. Her emerald silk blouse caught the morning light as she moved with practiced authority, every gesture calculated for maximum impact. The red Louboutin stilettos clicked against the marble in deliberate rhythm as she approached Valeria's chair, her diamond tennis bracelet sparkling with each movement of her perfectly manicured hands. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step away from our premium services area," Isabella announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. Her tone was professional, even helpful on the surface, but carried an unmistakable undertone of command that brooked no argument. She gestured toward the general banking area with a movement that appeared polite but felt dismissive, a practiced motion that communicated hierarchy without crude language. Perhaps our community banking representatives would be better positioned to assist with your particular needs. Isabella's performance was masterful in its sophistication. She had learned to discriminate with designer clothing and perfect grammar to exclude with policy rather than profanity to maintain plausible deniability while making her message absolutely clear. This was prejudice refined by Ivy League education and expensive training discrimination that hid behind institutional procedure and corporate protocol. "I understand you may have traveled here with certain expectations," Isabella continued, her voice projected to reach every corner of the lobby. "But Heritage Trust maintains specific standards for our premium services division. These standards exist to ensure all our valued clients receive the level of service they deserve in an appropriate environment." The language was carefully chosen, each word defensible in any complaint or review, but the meaning was unmistakable. Isabella had perfected the art of discrimination that could survive legal scrutiny while achieving its intended effect. Brittany Walsh watched from behind the premium services counter, notebook in hand, documenting everything for what she assumed would be a routine incident report. She had seen Isabella handle similar situations with the same polished professionalism, always managing to maintain Heritage Trust's reputation while achieving the desired outcome. David Morrison positioned himself slightly behind and to the right of Isabella, his military training making him acutely aware of positioning and tactical advantage. His radio crackled softly with updates from corporate security, but the situation appeared to be progressing according to standard protocol for managing unwelcome individuals. "Now I understand this may be frustrating." Isabella's voice took on a tone of manufactured sympathy, "but surely you can understand our position. Heritage Trust has built its reputation on maintaining certain atmospheres for our clientele. It's really in everyone's best interest if you utilize services more suited to your background and experience." Miguel Santos felt his chest tighten as he listened to Isabella's performance. 3 years of working under her management had taught him to recognize when appropriate service matching was code for something much less palatable. His wife Carmen's voice echoed in his mind from their conversation the night before Miguel. "If you see something wrong and do nothing, you become part of what's wrong." But challenging Isabella required courage that could cost him his career, his health insurance, his family's financial stability. Miguel remained at his desk documenting the interaction according to protocol, hating himself for his silence, but unable to find the strength to speak. From her live stream position, Sarah Jensen's voice carried clearly to her growing audience. Y'all are watching textbook institutional racism. This is how discrimination works in 2025. No slurs, no obvious hostility, just polite prejudice wrapped in policy. Her viewer count had climbed past 40,000, with comments flooding in faster than she could read. This is disgusting. Someone help that woman. Post this everywhere. I'm calling the bank right now. This manager needs to be fired immediately. Isabella, unaware of the digital documentation happening around her, continued her performance with growing confidence. I'm sure you understand that different institutions serve different communities. There are several excellent banks in this area that might be more culturally aligned with your expectations and needs. She paused meaningfully, allowing her words to settle throughout the lobby. Sometimes the most respectful thing we can do is acknowledge when services might be better provided elsewhere. James Murphy's Instagram Live had reached 35,000 viewers, his commentary sharp with controlled anger. This is what we're talking about when we say the system is rigged. This woman is being politely told she doesn't belong, and it's all being disguised as customer service. At her window table, Mrs. Rodriguez whispered into her own phone, her voice trembling with decades of accumulated pain. My granddaughter, this is what Abuela has been trying to tell you. This is how it really works. Isabella's final gesture was a masterpiece of sophisticated exclusion. She reached into her jacket pocket and retrieved an elegant business card, extending it toward Valeria with a smile that looked gracious but felt condescending. Here's the contact information for Community Trust Financial down the street. They have a wonderful team that specializes in serving diverse populations. I'm sure they'll be much more helpful with whatever brought you in today. The business card hung in the air between them like a gauntlet thrown down, a final insult wrapped in the language of helpfulness. Isabella's smile never wavered as she waited for Valeria to accept defeat and move toward the exit, completing another successful management of an inappropriate customer. The clock on the wall showed 9:59 a.m. Isabella Crawford Whitman stood at the peak of her performance, believing she had masterfully maintained Heritage Trust's exclusive standards while avoiding any actionable discrimination. She had no idea that in exactly 60 seconds, every word she had spoken would become evidence in her own termination, broadcast live to tens of thousands of witnesses who would ensure her sophisticated prejudice received the viral attention it deserved. With the clock showing exactly 9:59 a.m., Isabella Crawford Whitman prepared to deliver what she believed would be the final act in her sophisticated drama of exclusion. She had managed countless similar situations with the same polished professionalism, and today would be no different. Her diamond tennis bracelet caught the morning light as she reached for her phone with practiced authority. I'm going to need to make a quick call to verify your appointment, Isabella announced, her voice carrying across the marble lobby with the confidence of someone who controlled every variable in the equation. She dialed a number from memory, though everyone watching assumed she was calling Kenneth Harper's office. Instead, Isabella was calling her assistant's direct line, a number that would allow her to conduct a one-sided conversation that would sound like official verification while actually being completely fabricated. It was a technique she had perfected over years of managing difficult situations. Kenneth. Yes. It's Isabella. She spoke into the phone, her voice projected clearly so everyone in the lobby could follow the conversation. I have someone here claiming to have a 10:00 appointment with you. She paused, dramatically nodding as if listening to detailed instructions. I see. Yes. That's what I suspected. Another pause, longer this time, with Isabella's expression growing more serious. Emergency board meeting moved up to 9:30. Of course, I understand completely. Isabella's performance was flawless. Each pause timed perfectly, each expression calculated to communicate official disappointment rather than personal prejudice. No rescheduled appointments until next week. I'll let her know. Thank you for clarifying. She ended the call with a sigh that suggested genuine regret rather than manufactured dismissal. I'm terribly sorry, but Mr. Harper sends his apologies. An emergency board meeting was moved up to 9:30 this morning and his entire day has been rescheduled. He won't be able to accommodate any appointments until next week at the earliest. The lie was so smoothly delivered that even some of the staff believed it. Brittany Walsh made notes in her scheduling system, assuming she would need to help reschedule legitimate appointments that had been disrupted by corporate emergencies. But Isabella wasn't finished. She reached into her leather portfolio and retrieved a laminated document that looked official and intimidating. I'm also going to need to inform you about some recent policy updates regarding enhanced security protocols. The document was real part of Heritage Trust's updated security procedures, but Isabella was about to misapply it in ways that would provide legal cover for discrimination while appearing to follow corporate policy. Due to increased incidents of identity theft and financial fraud in this area, Isabella read from the laminated policy, Heritage Trust has implemented enhanced verification requirements for all new account access and high-value transaction requests. She looked up from the document with an expression of professional concern. These protocols require additional documentation and background verification that can take several business days to complete. Given the irregularities we've identified with your documentation today, these enhanced procedures would definitely apply. David Morrison's radio crackled with what sounded like urgent updates from corporate security, though the static made it impossible for others to understand specific details. In reality, David was receiving routine morning briefings about parking lot security and building maintenance, but the timing made it seem related to the current situation. I'm also required to inform you, Isabella continued, her voice taking on the formal tone reserved for official warnings, that continuing to request access to accounts or services after being informed of verification requirements could be construed as attempted unauthorized access under federal banking regulations. The threat was delivered with the same polished professionalism that characterized Isabella's entire performance, wrapped in legal language that sounded authoritative while being largely meaningless. But the message was clear: leave now or face potential criminal charges. From his live stream position, James Murphy felt his jaw clench with recognition. Y'all, this is how institutional discrimination works. It hides behind policy uses. Official language makes the victim responsible for the oppression they're experiencing. His viewer count had reached 45,000 with comments exploding across the screen. This is absolutely disgusting. Someone needs to help her. I'm sharing this everywhere. This bank is about to learn today. Corporate needs to see this. Sarah Jensen's TikTok Live had climbed past 50,000 viewers, her voice tight with controlled anger as she documented each step of Isabella's performance. This is masterclass discrimination, y'all. Professional prejudice with perfect grammar and expensive clothes. Miguel Santos watched from his desk as Isabella reached the crescendo of her authority play, feeling sick with the knowledge that he was witnessing something fundamentally wrong while lacking the courage to challenge it. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife. "How's your day going, mi amor?" He couldn't bring himself to respond. Isabella's final move was to step closer to Valeria's chair, positioning herself to loom authoritatively while maintaining enough distance to appear non-threatening. "Ma'am, I need you to understand that Heritage Trust takes security very seriously. Continuing to loiter on our premises after being informed that your business cannot be conducted today will require me to contact local law enforcement." She paused, allowing the threat to settle throughout the lobby. "I'm trying to help you avoid what could become a very unpleasant situation. The best thing for everyone involved is for you to gather your belongings and visit us again when you have the proper documentation and procedures in place." The clock on the wall clicked to 10:00 a.m. Isabella Crawford Whitman stood at the peak of her authority, having deployed every tool in her arsenal of sophisticated discrimination. She had policy, procedure, official documentation, security protocols, and legal threats, all supporting her position. What she didn't have was any understanding of who she was actually speaking to, or awareness that in exactly 30 seconds, every word she had spoken would become the foundation for her own professional destruction. The revolving doors at Heritage Trust's entrance began to turn, and everything Isabella believed about power, privilege, and proper procedure was about to be utterly dismantled. The revolving doors of Heritage Trust Bank began their slow rotation at exactly 10:00 a.m., and the atmosphere in the marble lobby shifted with the precision of stage lighting dimming before a dramatic revelation. The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished floor as footsteps approached with the measured cadence of authority, each sound echoing off the gilded columns like a drumbeat announcing the arrival of judgment itself. Kenneth Harper entered first, his usually confident stride betraying a subtle nervousness that came from 30 years of banking experience and an acute awareness that this particular meeting would determine the future of his career. Behind him walked Patricia Morrison, Senior Vice President of Regional Operations, her expression serious as she reviewed documents on her tablet. Following closely came Marcus Webb, Legal Counsel, and Jennifer Liu, Chief Compliance Officer, their presence indicating that today's business extended far beyond routine contract renewals. The small entourage moved with the purposeful efficiency of corporate executives who understood that time was money and meetings were investments that required precise returns. Their expensive suits and confident bearing immediately commanded attention from everyone in the lobby, the kind of presence that suggested important decisions and significant consequences would flow from whatever business brought them here. Isabella Crawford Whitman felt a surge of validation as she recognized the regional director's arrival. Her performance had been perfectly timed, the disruptive customer situation managed just before Kenneth's entrance. She straightened her emerald silk blouse and prepared to greet the executives with the professional warmth that had built her reputation as Heritage Trust's most successful branch manager. But Kenneth Harper's expression changed the moment his eyes found Valeria Richmond, sitting quietly in the standard banking area portfolio on her lap, hands folded, expression calm but alert. The color drained from his face with such speed that Patricia Morrison followed his gaze to understand what had caused such visible distress. Dr. Richmond Kenneth whispered the words carrying across the marble lobby like a prayer offered too late for salvation. The recognition in his voice was immediate and absolute, tinged with the kind of panic that comes from realizing that catastrophic mistakes have already been made and cannot be undone. Isabella's confident expression faltered as she processed Kenneth's reaction. The formal title, the tone of recognition, the sudden shift in atmospheric pressure that suggested she had misunderstood something fundamental about the situation developing around her. Valeria Richmond stood with the same measured grace she had displayed throughout the morning, her movement suggesting infinite patience, finally rewarded with appropriate attention. "Mr. Harper?" she replied, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room she chose to enter. "You're 3 minutes early for our meeting," she continued, consulting her watch with the casual precision of someone whose time was measured in millions of dollars per minute. "I appreciate punctuality." Her tone was professional, pleasant even, but carried undertones that suggested the previous 20 minutes had been observed, documented, and evaluated according to standards Kenneth Harper was just beginning to understand. The silence that followed was total and crushing, the kind of quiet that occurs when entire world views collapse simultaneously across multiple people who suddenly realize they have been operating with dangerously incomplete information. Isabella stood frozen, her mind racing to process what Kenneth's recognition implied about the woman she had spent 20 minutes dismissing, humiliating, and threatening with legal consequences. Brittany Walsh went stiff as a mannequin behind the premium services counter, her pen hovering motionless above paperwork that suddenly seemed utterly insignificant. David Morrison's military training kicked in, his posture shifting from enforcement readiness to protective alert, as he realized he had been positioning himself as a threat to someone who might be deserving of protection rather than suspicion. Miguel Santos felt his stomach drop as pieces fell into place, his 3 years of uncomfortable compromises suddenly crystallizing into a moment of absolute clarity about what he had been participating in and what consequences might be approaching. From his live stream position, James Murphy's voice carried across the digital sphere to 52,000 viewers. Y'all, something just changed. The whole energy in here just shifted. This regional director looks like he's seen a ghost. Sarah Jensen's TikTok Live had climbed to 68,000 viewers, her commentary sharp with growing excitement. The executives just arrived and they recognize her. Oh my God, this woman is about to flip this entire script. Valeria stepped forward with the confident stride of someone who had built empires from nothing and understood exactly how power operated in every dimension. Her heels made soft contact with the marble as she moved toward the center of the lobby, positioning herself where every person present could see and hear what was about to unfold. Allow me to introduce myself properly to those who felt I didn't exist 20 minutes ago. She began, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the lobby, from the premium seating area to the teller stations to the security desk where David Morrison stood in growing dread. She turned slowly, making eye contact with every employee who had participated in her dismissal, her gaze lingering on Isabella with particular attention. I am Dr. Valeria Richmond, founder and CEO of Richmond Capital Holdings. The words settled over the lobby like a blanket of snow, muffling all sound except the soft hum of air circulation and the distant murmur of traffic outside. Patricia Morrison's tablet slipped in her hands. Marcus Webb's legal pad fell to his side. Jennifer Liu stopped mid-stride as the implications cascaded through her compliance-trained mind. As of last Friday afternoon, Valeria continued, her voice steady and measured. Richmond Capital Holdings completed acquisition of a controlling 67% stake in Heritage Trust Financial Services. She paused, allowing the mathematics to settle into every mind present. Which means, Ms. Crawford Whitman, that every policy you cited, every procedure you followed, every threat you made was ultimately authorized by my signature. Isabella's diamond tennis bracelet caught the light as her hand moved unconsciously to her throat, her perfect composure cracking like expensive porcelain dropped on marble. The sophisticated discrimination that had been her trademark was about to be evaluated by its ultimate target, and the reversal was so complete that her mind struggled to process the new reality. Kenneth Harper stepped forward, his voice carrying the desperation of someone watching their career flash before their eyes. Dr. Richmond, please, this must be a misunderstanding. Our staff follows strict protocols for customer service excellence. Valeria's smile was patient but contained no warmth. Mr. Harper, I've been observing your staff's protocols for the past 20 minutes. I've experienced your customer service excellence firsthand. She gestured toward the chair where she had been forced to wait. The experience has been enlightening. The lobby had become a courtroom, and judgment was about to be rendered by someone who held absolute authority over everyone present. But for Valeria Richmond, this moment wasn't about revenge. It was about completing a promise made to a man who had died believing that systems never change, that doors remain closed, and that dignity is reserved for people who look like they belong. Today, she was about to prove him wrong. Dr. Valeria Richmond moved to the center of Heritage Trust Bank's marble lobby with the deliberate precision of a surgeon preparing to operate on a diseased institution. The morning light streaming through tall windows illuminated her calm expression as she opened her leather portfolio, retrieving documents that would transform everything. Every person present understood about power, accountability, and consequence. Before we proceed with our scheduled meeting, Mr. Harper, Valeria's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to boardrooms where billion-dollar decisions were made with quiet words and absolute finality. I believe we need to address some immediate personnel matters that have come to my attention. She withdrew a single sheet of paper, holding it with the same care a prosecutor might handle the key evidence in a capital case. Ms. Crawford Whitman, please step forward. Isabella's red Louboutin stilettos clicked against the marble with less authority than they had carried 20 minutes earlier. Her emerald silk blouse, perfectly pressed that morning, now seemed somehow diminished as she approached the woman she had spent considerable effort dismissing from the premises. Ms. Crawford Whitman. Valeria's voice remained professionally neutral, though every person in the lobby could sense the weight of judgment behind her words. In the past 20 minutes, you have violated Heritage Trust's stated commitment to equal service, our federal compliance requirements, and basic standards of human decency. She consulted the document in her hands with the precision of someone reading charges in a courtroom. You fabricated verification problems with my documentation. You manufactured a false appointment cancellation. You threatened legal action based on fictional policy violations. You directed me to leave the premises based solely on your assessment of my appearance and your assumptions about my financial status. Isabella's mouth opened to offer explanation or defense, but Valeria continued without pause, her voice steady and implacable. Your employment with Heritage Trust Bank is terminated effective immediately. The words fell like a gavel, final and absolute. Security will escort you from the building within the next 5 minutes. Your access to all Heritage Trust systems and properties is permanently revoked. Kenneth Harper stepped forward, his voice carrying the desperation of damage control. Dr. Richmond, perhaps we should discuss this privately. Ms. Crawford Whitman has been one of our most successful managers, and I'm sure we can address any concerns through proper channels. Valeria turned to him with the patient expression of someone explaining simple mathematics to a child. Mr. Harper, this is the proper channel. I am the majority stakeholder. My concerns are being addressed exactly as they should be. She moved to David Morrison, whose military posture had gradually shifted from enforcement readiness to something approaching attention as he realized his position in the developing situation. Mr. Morrison, Valeria's voice carried no personal animosity, only the cold evaluation of professional performance. You responded to a fraudulent security alert by positioning yourself to intimidate a customer who had committed no violation of any actual policy. You prepared to escalate to law enforcement based on fabricated concerns rather than verified threats. David's training had taught him to accept responsibility when operations went wrong, but this level of wrongness extended beyond anything his military experience had prepared him for. Your security clearance is permanently revoked, Valeria continued. Please surrender your badge radio and any other Heritage Trust property to Mr. Harper immediately. The methodical nature of the dismissals was more devastating than anger would have been. Each termination was delivered with the same professional courtesy that Isabella had used to disguise her discrimination, but with the crucial difference that Valeria's authority was absolute, and her evidence was unassailable. From his live stream position, James Murphy provided commentary to 74,000 viewers whose numbers continued climbing. This is what accountability looks like when it's delivered by someone with actual power. No committees, no investigations, no lawyers finding loopholes. Just consequences. Sarah Jensen's TikTok had reached 89,000 viewers, her voice tight with excitement. Y'all, we are witnessing history. This is what justice looks like when the people who deserve it actually have the power to deliver it. But Valeria wasn't finished. She turned to Brittany Walsh, whose notebook had fallen forgotten to the counter as she watched her colleagues' careers end with surgical precision. Ms. Walsh, Valeria's voice carried a different tone now, one that suggested evaluation rather than judgment. You followed orders from a supervisor who was violating both company policy and federal law. Your position is not terminated, but you will report to our corporate training center Monday morning for mandatory education in anti-discrimination procedures and customer service excellence. Brittany's relief was visible, though tempered by the understanding that her career at Heritage Trust would forever be marked by this morning's events. Your probationary period will extend for 6 months, during which your interactions with customers will be monitored and evaluated according to the highest standards of professional service, regardless of customer appearance, background, or perceived financial status. Miguel Santos approached Valeria's position with visible nervousness, understanding that his 3 years of uncomfortable compromises were about to be evaluated by someone who had witnessed their ultimate consequence. Mr. Santos, Valeria's voice carried a different quality now, something that might have been recognition rather than condemnation. You observed discriminatory behavior and failed to intervene. However, our review of your employment record shows consistent professional service and multiple instances where you have advocated for customers facing unusual delays or verification requirements. Miguel's surprise was evident as Valeria continued. You are promoted to interim branch manager effective immediately. Your first responsibility will be implementing comprehensive anti-discrimination training for all remaining staff and establishing new procedures that ensure every customer receives identical service regardless of any factor other than their actual banking needs. The reversal was so complete that Miguel struggled to process what had occurred. In the space of 30 minutes, he had gone from fearful accomplice to senior manager of an institution owned by the woman he had helped discriminate against. Rachel Torres, who had spent the morning documenting everything she witnessed, found herself face-to-face with the person whose treatment she had recorded with growing discomfort. Ms. Torres, Valeria's voice carried approval that surprised everyone listening. Your documentation of this morning's events shows both professional integrity and personal courage. You are promoted to Customer Advocacy Coordinator, a new position responsible for ensuring that every customer concern is addressed promptly and fairly. The transformation was complete. Now careers ended and begun, authority redistributed, and an entire institution restructured in the time it might take to conduct a routine transaction. Kenneth Harper stood in the center of the reorganized lobby, understanding that his own evaluation was yet to come, and that everything he had built during his banking career now depended on how he responded to the next few minutes of conversation with a woman whose patience he had exhausted and whose authority he had underestimated catastrophically. Dr. Valeria Richmond stood in the center of Heritage Trust Bank's transformed lobby, surrounded by the aftermath of decisions that had taken 30 minutes to make but would reshape an entire institution permanently. The morning light continued to stream through tall windows, but everything it illuminated had fundamentally changed in ways that would ripple far beyond these marble walls. Kenneth Harper, Patricia Morrison, and the corporate executives formed a semicircle around her. Their expressions